Hello, everyone. I'm Rebecca Guevara. I'm the instructor for your class. So this is Math 1414. So there are two different college algebra classes. There is Math 1314, which is if you don't need to, pretty much if you don't need to take pre-cal, that's probably the math class you wanted. If you do need to take pre-cal or a lot of science that's very math-based, or you're planning on taking calculus and things like that, this is the class you want. You want to be in this one, which is Math 1414. Um, and I just want to go through that because that is always, I think we get a little confused on. Let me take us to our Canvas page here. So as you see, I have that again. This course is for those in a STEM pathway. Nursing does not necessarily count as a STEM pathway. If you're in nursing and you were put in this class, you may want to go talk to an advisor because probably really what you want is 1314. Let me break down that. So if you think you're in the wrong one, it's Math 1314. So if you talk to your advisor, they can look that over. We can try to give you some assistance as well. So I say that because Math 1314 is a fairly easy class, but Math 1414 is a little more complicated because we are preparing you for pre-calculus and calculus. So if that is your path, that's the classes you're planning on taking, then you do need to be in this course. So I just have some information here. My name, my email, which you probably already have. The best way to contact me, I'll be pretty honest, is going to be your Canvas inbox because it goes to my email and it's in my Canvas. And the plus of that is that if you do send through the Canvas inbox, then it's easier for me to track down your messages. The reason to send email for the most part is that if you're trying to send something with a document attached, sometimes the documents will not go through the Canvas inbox or the Canvas messaging system. I would suggest using email if you're trying to send something with an attachment or an image or something like that. I usually get those a little better. So if you do send me a message and I don't reply, usually it means because the message didn't go through, which occasionally happens, or got buried under a massive email. Occasionally I might suspend answering something just because what you asked me was very complicated and I have to do some research, but you usually know if it's going to be something like that. So contact hours. So I'm in my office during these hours, but if you need to, you can always try to schedule an appointment over Zoom as well. Just send me a message and we'll set something like that up. But Monday and Wednesdays, I'm in my office from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. And then Tuesday and Thursday from 12:30 to 2:30. So I'm in Biloxi 313G, which if you go into the Biloxi building, um, if you go up one elevator, you're gonna come across doors that are gonna keep you out. If you go all the way to the back of the building, about where the cafeteria is, there's another elevator. If you take that to the third floor, you should be able to walk into the office suite with no problem. Okay, so let's go look at a few things. Uh, okay. So if this course syllabus is supposed to be the one you're supposed to open, sometimes the link doesn't work. And I'll show you here. I have put it someplace else just in case that doesn't work. There's another way to get to it. Um, and ignore this number because sometimes there's going to be some dual enrollment students in this course and sometimes not, so that number may change. But this is just my same information, where to find me, what got my phone number in here is the only extra thing. The book that we're using, so we're not using the same book as most of the instructors at NLC. We're using this one by Sullivan, which a lot of our sister colleges are using. This is a new book, so there's going to be some new stuff for us to discover along the way with using a new book. We're also using a new integration system with Pearson here as well, but I don't think it's going to cause us problems. What I really want to go through is just sort of the simple breakdown of this class. So because we're online and we don't have a chance to really see each other and talk, I'm going to have discussion boards. And my discussion boards pretty much are just, I try not to make it too involved. Usually it's like a little discussion to kind of get you guys talking to each other. So you make a post answering whatever it is I ask, and then try to reply to another student's post. You have to do both things, make your own reply and then respond to another student to receive credit on this. So this is pretty much like a credit, no credit assignment. Your homework, which you're going to find here through Access Pearson, and I'll also show you another place to get to it. Pretty much just going to be always due into Wednesdays after the assignment takes place. So anything that was an assignment for this week is due next Wednesday. So after the due date, you can open the assignment, and I'll show you how to do that. But there will be a 2% grading penalty after that. So that grading penalty is going to go on to the questions that you did not answer. So if you'd had like answered like 80% of the homework or the assignment before the due date, the only part that's getting a deduction is the 20% you do afterwards. I do not plan on changing due dates unless there is some sort of catastrophe, like we get hacked or a variety of other things that could happen. So unless it's something to affects all of us, due dates I do not plan on changing. Your quizzes, there'll be a quiz once a week. If you miss a quiz, there really isn't a makeup. I'm just going to drop to your lowest quizzes. So if something happens and you can't make it hit a quiz or two, those quizzes will eventually drop off of your grade. And usually I wait till I get about 5 quizzes in before I start dropping grades, because otherwise um, it gives you a kind of a bad estimate of what your grade is. So I prefer to make you look like your grade's lower than it is and think it's higher than it is, and then you're shocked later when all of a sudden it's much lower. Your quizzes are timed for 15 minutes and you have 2 attempts at them, which I'll show you how to get to those attempts. So your exams, you're going to have 3 exams throughout the semester. They're going to cover roughly 3 to 4 weeks of material. They fall about I think one's on week 4, one's on week 8, one's on week 12. We'll see here in a second when I put it at. So like I said, they're going to cover roughly 3 to 4 weeks of material. If you miss an exam and have a legitimate excuse, like sometimes you're deployed and you don't have internet out in the middle of Germany or wherever it is that you happen to be. Um, I have a lot of people on bases that get messed up and then they can't get internet and things like that. That's a legitimate excuse that we can do something. I'm going to impose a 10% grading penalty if I have to reopen an exam for you to take it. I have too many cases of people having to reopen exams. But you will have an opportunity to improve your grade later. So ideally, this shouldn't happen more than once to you that you can't take an exam, and you could probably make up that grade later. When we get to that point, we'll talk about how you're going to make up that exam grade. So I time these for about 120 minutes because that's about how much time you would have had in class to take it. So it's 2 hours. And I put in 3 attempts. So if you're in dual enrollment, depending where you're dual enrollment, this part may be different for you. These exams are going to use the Pearson Lockdown browser and the Respondus monitoring. So if there are signs of cheating or you did not follow the rules for taking the exams, I'll show you what those rules are, you are going to be given a 0 for the attempt. So we're just trying to make sure that it's you, basically, that you're going to present your ID, prove that it's you taking the test. Make sure there's no one else in the room with you, that you're not using a phone while you're on your test, things like that, that it's just you and your device. That's what we want to make sure is happening when you take your exam. You can use calculators. There are a few things that might get flagged. If you think you're getting flagged for something that you're not doing wrong, just send me an email and I'll go back and check everything. Frequently you guys get flagged for things that it gets confused about, like pictures in the background, things like that. Final exams, same situation. Your final exam will be given during your final week. Oh, I should specify here. I'm sorry. Exams will be left open for 5 days. So you have 5 days to take those exams. So I would suggest trying to take them earlier rather than later, just in case you do run into some sort of problem that may cause you to have to postpone the exam and have to take a 10% penalty. So your final exam, you don't get a makeup time. This is the last week of class. We can't really reschedule it or anything like that. Sorry, this is a leftover for face-to-face classes. The schedule will not be announced later. We know exactly when it'll be. It'll be at the end of class. The final exam will be comprehensive, meaning it's going to cover everything in the class. Questions can be from any topic covered in the course. Unfortunately, you'll not be able to make up the final exam. So basically, if you miss the final exam, you miss the final exam. Like I said, there are some like extreme situations we can work around that, but for the most part, if you miss it, you miss it. The final exam is timed for 150 minutes, and once again, you'll have 3 attempts because we're going to be using the Pearson Lockdown browser and Respondus monitoring. So if one of your attempts has a sign of cheating, then once again, you'll get a 0 for that attempt. Really, what we're looking for is you have those extra attempts. So if your grade is bad, you can do an attempt. And then if I look and I say, hey, it looks like you're cheating, then you have a chance to try to do it again without any problems. On top of that, I'd like to see the exam work for your submissions. That is 10% of your grade is just simply going to be turning in that work for your exam. So that's just the written work that you worked for the problem. I ask that you make that legible so I can read it because what I would like to do with it is take it and go back and grade your exams because sometimes you just typed in the answer wrong. Sometimes you knew what to do for the most part, but you made a silly mistake. And I can't tell that unless I see the written work. Just go through that again. So 5% discussion boards, 20% is your homework, 15 are your quizzes, 30% is exams, 20% finals, and 10% is from the work, the exam paperwork. So we will be taking attendance. You'll see these things called biosig assignments. That's just a way of doing attendance. It's a complicated explanation, but essentially I have to use the biosig for your online classes, and we need some sort of way to do attendance. So, but just sort of kill 2 birds with 1 stone, make an assignment. Assignments will not be accepted after the final exam. Once the final exam day is done, that means it's the end of class, and you will not be turning those assignments unless you are granted it incomplete, which, once again, that requires some extreme circumstances to get that. Once again, I will not be changing due dates. Your exams, including final, will be completed within a 5-day window. If you miss the exam, you cannot make it up after the window closes. Like I said, except for that percent penalty part. Quizzes, due dates are final because I'm going to drop the lowest 2. Homeworks are going to have that 2% grading penalty after the due date. I don't know why it keeps doing this here on my syllabus. I keep fixing it. Discussion boards. Try to remember not everybody in this course may be over 18. So in discussion boards, try to have appropriate conversations. There isn't much in there that should trigger anything that's not appropriate, but to forewarn you about that. And then I just ask that you're, polite to each other. There's no need to be impolite because you don't like what somebody else likes or anything like that. And usually that's, once again, not a problem. Availability. So I will attempt to grade everything within a week. And mostly what I'm going to be grading that's going to take a while will be your exams. Everything else sort of auto grades. The only thing I'd have to do is just go back in and make sure that everything's going where it's supposed to. The one thing that's going to take some time in grading is those exams because I have to go back through and check your work and then regrade your exams. So what was I grading? Emails. So for the most part, I'm around at work from 10:30 to 3:30. That's mostly when I'm going to be answering emails if I'm not in class. So I say, please give me 2 business days to respond. There's been some new rules in effect, so it makes it harder for me to answer emails at home. So I try not to do that unless it's an absolute emergency. So we give in weekends. Like I said, that's why it's 2 business days. Weekends are not business days. So over the weekend or holidays, I may not answer emails as well. If you do send an email and you don't hear from me, like say after a couple days, feel free to send me a follow-up email because sometimes things happen and emails don't make it to me. If you use Canvas Messenger sorry, you can use Canvas Messenger or you can use your Alamo email. I would say always use those. Do not use private emails because it's what we call it's a FERPA violation or possibly a FERPA violation. Your educational records are protected. So we want to make sure that the person that we're talking to is you. So we assume anybody has access to your Canvas or your college email is okayed by you to see those messages. Private messages, we do not have a way to verify that we're supposed to, allowed to respond to those emails. That means we can't tell your parents' information either unless they sign some documentation. Calculators, my suggestion would be a TI 36 Pro or a TI 84 or even the TI 84 what's it called again? Evo. I have one right here. Uh, so if you are planning on taking a lot of math classes, it's probably worth the investment in getting a TI 84. Um, that being said, you can get by with pretty much a scientific calculator. You do not have to have a graphing calculator. We're not going to be sitting there going through graphs, looking at things for the most part. You may be asked to like sketch a graph, but not really anything that's going to really require necessarily that you have a graphing calculator. It's just there mostly to help you. Mostly what you need to do is just do some basic calculations you can do with a scientific calculator. If you need a calculator, say for your exams, because the only calculators you should be having are or anything, the only thing you should be doing calculations with is an actual calculator, not with a phone calculator. So the library, at least at NLC, has some that you can loan for 4 hours. You can check them out for 4 hours and return them. I believe they have a few that you can loan, check out for the entire semester. And I would say go get those now if you wanted to get one. I do not know if dual enrollment can get those. I'll tell you that, but I think you have other ways to get them. I do for your homework. You can use Desmos Scientific or graphing calculators. I have those linked for you. There's also a Calculate 84 phone app that you can use as well. The Pearson Lockdown browser. Just kind of quickly go through this. What it is when you open up an exam, you should come up against this Pearson Lockdown browser, which you're going to have to download. So I haven't had anybody have problems with using this browser. If you have a laptop that you got from the college, and once again, if you're dual enrollment and you have one from your school, there may be some problems there. Then we're going to use the Respondus monitoring. It says lockdown browser and monitoring, but it's really, if we're using Pearson, they're going to make you use their version of the lockdown browser, but you still use the monitoring. So what's important? I would say just read all this, but kind of the gist is that when you take an exam, I want to make sure this is working. I'm going to have a exam that is due at the end of the first week for you to make sure that you got this working. I can always open it up again if you find at the end of the week you have some issues with it. But later when we get to our first exam, which is 5 weeks in, not 4 weeks in, I'm sorry. It's going to be on the fifth week. You get your first exam. You are going to be using this browser, so we want to make sure it's working ahead of time. So what you want to do is make sure you have a webcam because we want to be able to see you, because what you're going to be doing is instructed to take an ID, so like a driver's license or even your school ID or a government ID. Put it up with you so we can see that's actually you. Then you're going to like scan your room with your laptop or webcam or whatever, show us that no one else is in the room for the most part. And then things you want to make sure you don't do. Try not to do not talk to other people. So be careful, like if you're trying to work on something, you're talking to yourself, it may trigger as you're talking to other people. Sometimes we're gonna look at that and tell what's going on. So we have don't cover your webcam or try to stay in view of your webcam. I know sometimes you put your head down. I mean, that's fine as long as we can tell that you're, we can see kind of what you're looking at. Read questions out loud. Like I said, it'll trigger problems. Not completely showing your surroundings during the environmental check can be a problem. Using a phone, tablet, or computer or other device other than the one you're taking your exam on, you do not want to have those. Using notes or textbooks during your exam. Speaking to other people during your exam. So we want to make sure you're not talking to other people. And all the forms of what we consider economic dishonesty that's listed within the syllabus. So you'll see that's going to be in here. So this is really just the part I wanted to go through, is that you just want to make sure that you follow these rules, because we go in and we see that you're standing there and your friend walks in, you're having a conversation and you're working on things that might get triggered and you might have to retake the exam. If we see you take out your phone, start looking up things, or all of a sudden you disappear off screen for a little bit, that will be something that will trigger you getting a 0 on that exam, and then you'll have to do another attempt. And once again, like I said, so currently this version of the class, so just in the future, this could be the same thing, because we have a lot of dual enrollment in our online classes. So we do have dual enrollment students. So for them, like I said, just want to be careful that they're going to be under 18. So be a little careful about conversations that you have. And then the other part of that is that you may see things like different tests pop up in the homework, because depending on the testing situation, I may have to construct a different way for them to take exams. It's like sometimes they have to take them in two parts and things like that. So just aware of that. Not necessarily special treatment. For the most part, we're trying to keep you even as best that we can. This is a list of topics that for the most part, like I said, you got your quizzes in there, you got your exams listed. Yeah, week 5, first exam. I thought I had that off. Week 10, second exam, and then week 15 is your third exam, and then, well, finals. I try to leave a little gap there so you have time to finish your homework. Additional topics, most likely I will not be adding those unless you guys look like you're just flying through this and everything is easy breezy. I will probably not be adding extra topics. Okay, going back to the home screen. So off to the side, the things that are going to be really important to you is Pearson Access and your modules and your grades. Announcements, those usually pop up for you, so don't have to worry about that. I do send announcements and I try to, if they're really important, email them to everyone. If you haven't used Canvas before, so if you go to modules, with orientation module, you pretty much go through that in the home screen because if you click on these parts, it'll take you right to those modules. It's a lot of the same stuff that we discussed already. And there's that discussion board, but it's linked elsewhere. If you don't want to see this anymore, there you go, it's gone. You have your student resources. I'm sorry, I forgot. I had to go to teacher mode there for a second to make your syllabus work. Now, this is what you guys should see. Okay, I'll close that out. Student resources. So once again, I would suggest at least going through this. This part right here, this is a few things in here I'd say was important. Is this OLRN 00001. Basically, this is like a mini class about taking classes online. That's something that you need to have completed if you haven't already. And then there's the BioSig instructions. So it tells you how to set up the BioSig. For the most part, yeah, it's like got a little video in here. What it's going to do is you either pick whatever device that you're going to be signing in on. So for when I did mine, I was using a touchpad. So it will have you several times enter in a PIN, and then later on when you have to do your attendance check, you're just going to sign in that PIN. Okay, so like I said, those are the two things you definitely want to do. And this discussion board appears someplace else. And like I said, this is just things about, like academic dishonesty, how to use Zoom, which you don't have to worry about it. This is your student resources. This is the instructions on the exam proctoring. This is that same part in your syllabus, all the things you want to watch for in your exam. And then this is instructions about the Pearson Lockdown browser. If you have any issues with this, just let me know because this combination of the Pearson browser and the monitoring software, as far as I can tell, it works okay. But my experience is that Respondus has touchy periods. Online calculator. So I have show you links to 2 emulators. One's the TI-30, and then one's a TI-84. So like I said, those are nice for your homework. You don't have to worry about going and borrowing a calculator. So you can do most of your work on there and still know how to use a TI-30 or TI-84. They didn't have one for a 30 TI-36. Sorry about that. But a 30 should be sufficient. And if you need to, you can go borrow a calculator later. So you're still familiar with this use. So this, I can't show you too much because it's not working, but this here, if you just click on it, it'll take you to a page. You probably have to do a sign in, but what it is, it's an AI tutor that we have. I'll try to give you more about it later once I can get in there and show you more, but essentially it's here so you can type in questions or copy and paste them, and it guides you on how to work through a problem or explain a topic for you. So if like you can't get to tutoring or something like that, you still have this AI tutor, and supposedly it's worked really well for a lot of people. I believe I had all my stuff. Well, that's right, because they took down my classes and then they're waiting for the new ones. If I can, I'll upload all my stuff into it. So then it has all my information as well. Okay, so here's a really important thing. This is a normal class setup. So for a week, you're going to see an overview, content, your attendance, your discussion board. And like I said, this discussion board is the same as this one here, not a different one. Where was I? A discussion board, and then your homework assignments, a quiz, and then a week wrap up. So most of this you don't really need, like these two at the end, they're just sort of like tell us like this is what we're covering, this is what we covered. And it gives you due dates, but you can see all your due dates here. The only time this is really changes is when we get to an exam. Then I put the exam instructions, at least for the first exam, up here. And then what you'll see here is you'll probably have one homework assignment opposed to like two or three. And then you're just going to have the exam, and then you're going to have the submission topic for your homework. Once again, if something doesn't work, always let me know, but just go through this quickly to show you basic operation. So like I said, this will tell us our learning objectives, due dates. I didn't put the attendance check on there. I suggest you do them, but sometimes they don't work, so I don't put them on there as a to worry about. What I have here is if you want to use both of them, but I do have my PowerPoint presentations. And because I paired this is old notes with a new book, some of these sections are going to be a little weird because some of them are like 3 sections put together for your homework or where I got the information from because your book's a little strange. But I'll put the section as best as I can on here. So this is, like I said, this is everything about rules of exponents. This is the presentation notes. This is a worksheet if you wanted to print the worksheet and work on it. If you don't, that's fine because you don't need to submit them. And then I have all my videos are labeled here and just to show you how the videos should work. Okay, it sounds weird as I'm doing this. Let's go to YouTube. So if you go take it to YouTube, I do have it broken up. So if you don't want to like, nobody wants to sit and listen to an hour of video, maybe all at one time, you can like listen to, say, okay, I'll go through proctor rule, quotient rule, worksheet. Okay, then I'll go do something. And you know where to come back to it. So I do have it broken down. So you can just go to the sections that you need. And like I said, you should be able to see it. It's harder to see it from Canvas. But each one of them set up like that. So you don't have tons of videos in here. You just have like 3 videos or something like that. And then they're broken up. Okay, like I said, your biosig, so whatever device that you are using is what you're going to click on. But apparently I picked ClickPad. And it just wants to see how you do it. Mine doesn't match because I did it several years. I did it like 2 years ago, so I don't remember what it is anymore. But that's all you have to do is that, or there might be other ways that you'll have to go back and do it. And if you get stuck on this, let me know because occasionally that happens. Like I said, all it does is it's just going to put an attendance check in for you. Discussion boards, so they're pretty simple. It's like this one, first one is just, talking about yourself, explain why you're in this course, things like that. Thing to always remember. Oh, where did I put it in here? Yeah, try not to share any personal information. You want to reply to one other person after you do this. So like I said, you want to fill this in and then click like to reply, send in your message, and then you can click on somebody else's post. So your homework is going to come up like this. So there are 2 links to it. There is this one. I don't know why my accounts weren't linked. And oh, just a second. I'm in student view. I'll have to show you that later. If I wasn't student view, I'd go right to there. Leave student view. Let's do this one more time. I have a student account. There you go. Then I'll bring up the assignment. So this is Pearson's done a lot of changes, especially this one. So you can go get started or you can click on the problems and then you can work on each problem. So I'm gonna make a separate video about using Pearson for those who are not used to it. Okay. And then, like I said, other assignments, your quizzes are also through Pearson, so it'll be a similar thing. I just want to talk about how to do the second attempt to make sure it works here in a little bit. And then your week one wrap up just tells us, hey, you should have done all this. And then that's it. A few little things mentioned here. When we get close to exams, we'll go back on about that too. Second. Okay, this is what I wanted to show you with turning off. You will have this respondus monitoring test. That is not a assignment with a due date. That's just to make sure that this is working. The other thing, sorry, I want to teach review, so everything should work here, is you are going to have, this is the other kind of off assignment, is this common assessment practice or common assessment problem. So this is a problem that we give to every 1414 class that we have. And we use it to basically do some recording and about your progress and your ability to, I think this was on critical thinking, like your critical thinking skills or something like that, whatever it is we're testing that semester. But that's what this is. So when you do this, this is another submission assignment. So once you do it, you'll have to go in and submit. And so you should be able to copy down the common assessment and everything. Okay. I think the only other thing, yeah, just one other thing I wanted to talk. So your grade, because this is always a panic. Most of your grades you see just fine. Your homework, when you do an assignment, sometimes there's a little lag to that grade showing up. So do not panic right away. Like, let's say you do this factoring homework and you got a 29 out of 29 and you go in here and it says 18 out of 29. It just takes it a little while to work. If it's like by the end of like several hours later and it's still saying 18 out of 29, that's when you need to panic. The other thing that may happen is if you open the assignment and you look at it and you like maybe you do a problem, you close it out, it might say you have like 1 out of 29 and you failed the assignment. You can still complete the assignment. So just one of the things I want to point here is that this grade book here, for the most part, it's accurate. It's just the homework you have to watch out for. And you should also see this breakdown here that of your quizzes, your homework, your discussions, the exam work submissions, your exam and your final here. So you should see accumulation of those grades as well. And your total grade at the bottom. Okay, I'm gonna stop there. I will talk about or Access Pearson in another video, talking about how we use Pearson. So like I said, all assignments you should be able to get to for our homework and quizzes. Like I said, quizzes, you got multiple attempts at them. If you get locked out and you can't do your multiple attempts or you cannot open your assignment, you want to be able to go to Access Pearson, and that is where you're going to open up those assignments that they lock out on you in Canvas. But that's it for my sharing you what we have on Canvas and the layout of our syllabus. If you have more questions, let me know. When we get closer to the exam, I'll talk more about the exam and the proctoring system. And you know, currently, right now, all my modules are not open. There's a few of them are not open just because I was waiting for a few things to come through before I finished up those modules. But in a few weeks, I'd say you probably should see every single module in the class open so you can work through it. The only thing that you have to do on a certain date is your exams. Everything else you should be able to work ahead on. All right. Well, I hope you guys have a good semester, and I hope I do hear from you. And like I said, I hope you send me some questions. And I do like answering your questions. I don't get many of them, but you know, please let me know if there's anything you do need. I'll do my best to help you. Like I said, just send me messages, emails, anything like that. If we need to, we can always meet, or we can always meet in person over Zoom. Just let me know what's going on. If you have problems going on in your life that's causing issues, do not wait until it starts causing you issues. Just try to let me know as soon as possible so we can work things out. I know the policies seem like they're kind of harsh and you can't budge in certain places, but if you're having real problems, we can find ways to work around certain issues. So please let me know if you are having problems.